Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Arch Assessment. This is Arch, and I'm back with you with another one. I wanted to talk about the latest movie that just came out this weekend called Weapons, directed by Zach Cregger, who also directed Barbarian back about 3 years ago. So this is the latest horror installment from Warner Brothers New Line Cinema. So I just got to say, first and foremost, wow. This is by far one of the more interesting entries of 2025 thus far. I don't know if I would put this in my top five per se just yet, but it's definitely at least in my top 10 as of right now. So the whole cast of this movie was pretty stellar. You know, everybody from Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, who am I forgetting? Benedict Wong. Who else? My man that played Solo a few years back. He was pretty good in this. So everybody brought their A game to this movie. So this was, suffice to say, a very disturbing. There was a few jump scares here and there, old snap moments, if you will. So for those of you, if you have not watched this movie, please press pause and come back to this video later. So I am going to be delving into spoiler territory, and I'll just give my quick take on it, and then we'll go from there. So this is your last chance. So if you have not seen this yet, please pause and go see this movie, and then come back later and check out the review. So with that being said, this movie starts off very interesting. It starts off with multiple takes from different various points of view. You know, it's not just a singular linear story. It's told from different points of view from six different characters. The first being Justine, played by Julia Garner of Ozark fame. Secondly is Josh Brolin, who plays one of the fathers of the missing children. Thirdly, I believe, is Paul, played by Alden. I can't remember his last name, who played Solo. He is a cop, ex-boyfriend of Julia Gardner's character. Then we have a guy named James, played by Austin Abrams, who is like the local town base head, if you will. And then we have Benedict Wong as the school principal. And then lastly, we have a viewpoint from this kid named Alex. So in case, for those of you who are not familiar with the plot, the premise of this movie, it's about 17 or so kids missing from a particular classroom. More specifically, Julia Gardner's character, Justine's classroom. So Justine, her character, is made the scapegoat of this incident. So one night at 2:17 a.m. in the morning, 17 kids from Julia Gardner's character's classroom just got up in the middle of the night, opened up the door, and just wander off into the darkness. And they were missing for a particular amount of time. I want to say at least a month. So that's the big mystery, is like, where did these kids run off to at the same time? What happened to these kids? Are they still alive? Are they just missing? What is going on? And the parents of the children, of course, want answers. So it just so happens that some of these parents have recorded footage of the kids running off into the middle of the night, but they don't know where. And they're angry, of course. They're scared. They want answers. And everybody is looking at Justine, who's played by Julia Gardner. So they think she has something to do with this. They think she's a witch. They think she has some ulterior motives, but she's just as clueless as everybody is. Little do they know. But no matter how she tries to explain that to them, they don't believe her, because there's a whole town school meeting, at a month, because the school shut down for like a month or so. And then they decided they had to reinstate it. So every kid from the classroom, save for one student, goes missing. And I'll get back to that later. So she gets up there, tries to speak her piece, let her know, hey, I'm just confused. I'm scared. I love those kids. I want answers just like the rest of you. And it got to the point where it got so bad, she was scared for her safety. She was getting threatened. They wanted her in jail. And the principal, played by Benedict Wong, is trying to escort her out, saying go straight home. But what we learned about Justine is she has a little bit of a shady past. And by shady, I mean she has an alcohol problem. She has a DUI. She got fired from her previous school for having inappropriate conduct with a fellow faculty member. So she's not like this squeaky clean person. She has her own set of demons, but a killer or some kind of witch, she is not. So she is like low-key downward spiraling, falling into a pit of depression. She gets put on leave, and she just doesn't know what to do with herself. And she's trying to connect with the remaining kid from her classroom named Alex, because she senses, and rightfully so, that he knows something and he has something to do with this. And she's just curious, So it leads her to following the kid around, which is optically suspect in and of itself, but she's trying to search for answers. And long story short, she ends up following this kid back to his house. She tries to talk to him, and he's very distant and standoffish and tells her flat out, "Leave me alone." And then she goes by the house to take a look around because she's curious. She knocks on the door, no answers, and she notices all the windows are taped with newspaper, which is pretty peculiar in and of itself. And to make matters worse, she circles around the house, looks around in the backyard, looks around, and then she starts peeking inside the window, like in a little space between the newspaper. And the way Zach Cregger just has a way of framing stuff and just making atmosphere creepy, unsettling, disturbing. And she looks and finds out that she sees two figures just sitting on the couch still. And it's just a quick shot for you to make out there's two people staring, but you don't know what's going on. You don't know if they're looking at her, if they're going to come after her, or what. Of course, she gets scared. She runs off. And then she's just starting to spiral. She tries to go home. She starts drinking, and she hears a loud banging on her door. She thinks she's being followed. And then, long story short, she has witch etched on the side of her vehicle. So she is getting painted as the town witch. So that's her cross to bear. So then it cuts over to another perspective, which is one of the fathers of the missing children. His name is Archer Graff, played by Josh Brolin. And he is one of these vigilant parents who's angry. He wants answers. He wants to know what's going on. He's very dissatisfied with the police investigation, and he feels like it's run its course. They're not taking it seriously as they should. And he does some research and is digging in his own. And he eventually comes to the conclusion that he realizes subtly that all the kids seem to be running in a similar direction, not just his son, but he tries to converse with other parents of the missing children. And then he eventually finds out that they were all going in the same direction, which leads to something. He doesn't know what exactly, he's not sure, but he knows it means something. He just can't pinpoint what it is. And I also just wanted to pinpoint, shout out to Justin Long, who plays one of the fathers of the other missing children that Archer Graff goes and see. If you don't know, Justin Long was also in Barbarian as well. So I thought it was just an interesting nod that he was happened to be in as well. So apparently he had some kind of working relationship with Zach Cregger. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. Josh Brolin's character is he owns a construction business, so he has a lot of blueprints going around, and he's looking at the map of the neighborhood, and he's trying to triangulate certain positions. And like I said, he finds out that the kids were all going in a similar direction. So he's trying to connect some pieces, and then he angrily confronts Julia Garner's character at the gas station, not violently, but he wants answers, and he strongly suspects she knows something that she's not telling, to which she is wrong, of course. And then that's when we see her, for some weird reason, out the blue, Marcus, who played by Benedict Wong, coming out of nowhere, and they showed a sneak clip of this earlier, that he's just running in the same stance as the children were, and he is not looking like himself. His eyes are bulging, and he's coming to attack Justine at the gas station while she's talking to Archer. So there was a whole incident with that where he accosts her in front of Archer at the gas station. He tries to attack her. Justine runs off, and Archer runs interference, and he's fighting him off too. She runs inside the convenience store, tries to run away. Marcus is coming after her, but Archer runs interference, knocks him down, and it just stops and goes to another's perspective. Then this is where we get to meet Paul, played by Alden. I forget his last name. Alden Ehrenreich, who played young Han Solo. So he plays a cop named Paul, who is a recovering alcoholic as well, and he's a former ex-boyfriend of Justine. So we get to see things from his perspective, and he's just out. He's a beat cop. He's not a police detective per se, but he is a patrol cop, and he's driving around, going on his business as usual, and then he sees a junkie named James in an alleyway trying to break into something, so he tries to haul him over, and of course, James runs off, and he has to give chase. And then he eventually catches up to him, and then pins him up. And then as he's searching him, he asks him, does he have any weapons, or does he have anything on him that can prick him? James lies, of course, that he doesn't, but he ended up, when Paul's digging in his pockets, he gets pricked by a needle. And of course, Paul gets angry and he knocks him out. But Paul forgot that he had his camera on in his car, which can record the whole footage. So of course, so Paul's freaking out about that, of course. So he wakes James back up and says, "Hey, listen, you poked me, I hit you. Are you awake? So let's just call it even. We did each other wrong. Let's call it even. But here's the thing: get out of town. I don't want to have to see you again, because if I see you again, it's going to be a different story." And then that was his day during the cops. So he's talks to his superior officer and let him know what happened. And his boss has basically told him that footage may only be around for a month, and hopefully it gets deleted or recorded over. And if he doesn't say anything within a certain amount of time, then I wouldn't worry about it. So he's like, okay. But he's a little stressed about that, low key, and he's got that hanging over his head. And then that's the same time he gets a text from Justine to meet her at the bar. And then that's when we saw him earlier in the movie meeting up with Justine in the bar. But at first, we didn't know that was going on. So again, Paul is a recovering alcoholic, and he and Justine are catching up. They're talking, but here's the thing: Paul is seeing another woman, or I believe he was married to another woman. I can't remember. And then, long story short, he and Justine hook up, and so he's hungover and he has some regrets about that. And then she drops him back off at his car, back at the bar where they first met, and then that was kind of the end of that. And then this is where we run into James's story. So James is like the guy that goes around stealing stuff. He's a junkie. He lives in a tent in the woods, and he's like breaking into cars, trying to find stuff to pawn so he can get some money for another hit. And he has a pawn shop he goes to all the time. And then somehow he gets the idea of, he stumbles upon this house that he thinks is vacant, keyword being thinks, and it happens to be Alex's house. And little does he know that there's still people in there. So when he first breaks in there, you can feel the tension. You want to know what's happening. And then he's looking around looking for stuff to steal, like silverware, DVDs, whatever. And then the way they shot this, then that's when he stumbles upon the parents just sitting on the couch. But they're catatonic. They're not moving. It's not like they're confronting him, asking like, "Why are you breaking my house?" They're just sitting there, not moving. And so he just continues to go on about his business. And somehow he ends up over in the basement. And then that's when he discovers the missing children are in the basement this whole time. So they're in Alex's house in the basement. So that was pretty wild. And then when he goes back and steals the silverware, then that's when the parents get up, and then that's when they like slowly start coming towards him. This is one of the scariest moments of the movie, and he's trying to hurry and get out of there, but the door is locked. So this is one of the most tension filled. But long story short, he manages to get out of there, and then he tries to pawn off the silverware, and he manages to scrounge up $100 here and there from the pawn shop. And then that's when he notices the $50,000 reward sign for the missing children. And then that's when he gets the idea to cash in on that. So he calls the police and say he knows where they are, but he's apprehensive about going over to the police station because he's afraid he's going to run into Paul, who warned him earlier that, hey, if you come around here again, it's going to be a problem. And of course, inevitably, he runs into Paul. And then Paul gives chase, of course, he runs off, and James thinks he lost him. But then that's when he sees this strange woman in the woods who happens to be the aunt of Alex. So she's a strange looking woman with this excessive clown looking makeup on her face. She has a red wig and whatnot. We don't know who she is exactly, but we saw her briefly before in one of Josh Brolin's nightmares. I forgot to mention that part because Josh, ever since his son was missing, Josh Brolin's character was sleeping in his son's room. And there was a strange dream sequence where he was trying to find his son. And then he sees there was a sequence where he sees a gun in the clouds over the room. There's a gun, and then it says 217 on it. So, and then he confronts and imagines seeing his son in his room. And then there's like a flash jump of the strange woman who we find out later is Aunt Gladys, who we later find out is the culprit, and she's the sole cause of all these missing children, which I'll touch into a little bit. But anyway, back to James. James is running from Paul. He's in the woods. He thinks he lost him, and then he happened to see Gladys, which freaked him out. So Gladys, on first glance, she has a very unsettling appearance. She has excessive makeup, very clownish, very over the top, Someone, if you saw her walking down the street, you cross, you switch sidewalks if you saw her coming your way. That kind of unsettling. So he runs off in his tent, hides. He thinks it's Gladys, and he had a couple of syringes in there, and he's like prepared. And then as soon as we see send something coming up to the tent, and then the zipper slowly unzipping, and come to find out it was still Paul. And James had stabbed him in the face with the syringes, and Paul is on the verge of killing him on the spot. But James like, whoa, 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 hold on a second. I know where the kids are. And James is like, okay, not James, Paul. Paul's like, okay, I'm listening. And then that's when he takes them and locks and throws them in the back seat. And that's when they go over to the house to see what so Paul can go investigate. And James is only in this because he thinks there's a reward involved. And then this is another strange because so Paul goes in there. Nothing looks strange, of course, but we know it's all bad. But the way it looks, he just calmly walks in. The door opens, and it sounds like it's somebody normal. The parents are being normal, and they're letting them in. And then James, mind you now, James is still stuck in the backseat of the car. He can't get out. And then he's stuck in there for hours, until nighttime. And then Paul finally comes back out, and we see that he's possessed. And then he pulls James back out and then drags him into the house. So now they're stuck in there. And then we also get a shot of the next sequence perspective is from Marcus, played by Benedict One, who's the principal. So with him, he is, we see it from his perspective. He's on the phone with Justine because Justine is just calling him, complaining about Alex's house and how this needs to be investigated. Something is very fishy. So Marcus agrees with Justine that he's going to have a meeting with Alex's parents to placate Justine. Long story short, and then so instead of the parents, Aunt Gladys shows up to the meeting, and Benedict One's character is under the impression she's one of the parents, but she's not. He finds out later, in fact, she's not technically the legal guardian, but she's the aunt. And then Aunt Gladys tells him like the parents are sick. I'm just sitting in for him, and he tries to explain to her like, I can't talk to you. I got to talk to the parents. And then this is where we get this is where we get to know about Aunt Gladys a little bit more, who she is, and we see that she's looking at a personal item from Marcus, the principal, and she grabs that. And then she stops by again while Marcus is with his husband at the house. She just shows up unannounced during the weekend, and she said she got lost, she got stranded, and she just comes inside. And then this is when we get the reveal, and this is where we slowly find out how the children disappeared. So we find out, long story short, Aunt Gladys is a witch. She has this thing where she gets a bowl of water, and she pricks her finger, and then she grabs a strand of hair from someone, and then this is how she's able to control people. So she's able to put Marcus in a trance-like state. She gets him. This is one of the most gruesome and disturbing scenes in the movie, where she gets him to kill his own husband by headbutting him to death. And then she makes him go off and go after Justine because she sees Justine as an obstacle. So we see Marcus running off into that like state where he has his arms out, like how we see on the poster of the film, just like the children. He's just running off, and this is where it leads to him accosting Justine at the gas station. So we see that whole sequence again where there's a fight between him, Archer, and Justine. So Justine manages to get back in her car after she was given chase, and she drives off frantically. Archer had injured himself while fighting Marcus in the gas station because he smashed into him and he cut his arm in the process. And then he gives chase going after Marcus. And then this is where Marcus is running on down the street, and long story short, he gets hit by a car and gets killed, and he's unalived. And then so this is where Archer ends up going back to the hospital to get some stitches for his arm, and we see Justine waiting for him. And this is the moment where they kind of reconcile their differences, and Archer realizes that Justine is not who he thought she was, and they start talking. And then Justine's trying to explain to Archer, like, I never seen him like that before. And this is where Archer admits that the way he was running looked familiar because that's how my son looked when he was running off. And then this is where Archer talks with Justine to show her his map and the triangulation he's trying to figure out. And this is where Justine fills in the missing puzzle about this all leads to Alex's house, which Archer did not know. So so they form together and they go to the house. And then this is where we get the last perspective from Alex, who is the surviving child from the classroom. So this all ties back to Alex. Alex is, bless his heart, was dealt a very bad hand. So he was a seemingly normal kid, a little meek. He was getting bullied by what I believe to be Josh Brolin's son in the classroom. You could say he was somewhat of an outcast, whatever. He's kind of quiet, he looks normal, but he's kind of low key, kind of keeps to himself. And basically, this is where he's around his parents, and this is when they tell him that not aunt, grandma. I think it was his grandma. If I said Aunt Gladys, I apologize. I think she was the grandmother supposed to be. And the father explained to him that she's coming home. She's going to be visiting for a while. We don't know how long she's going to stay. She may be here for a month, give or take. We don't know. And we find out she's a little ill. She's not well. And he kind of sees her at first when she comes to the house from a distance, but he doesn't really pay that close attention to her. And the next morning, it gets a little weird. We see Alex come down the stairs, and he sees the parents just sitting there still, looking at each other in a trance-like state. And this is where the grandmother tries to introduce herself. And of course, Alex is very uncomfortable because he knows something ain't right. And this is where she starts flexing her witching skills, and she gets his parents to start stabbing themselves in their own faces with forks. And she basically coerces Alex into doing her bidding, and she threatens to kill his parents if he doesn't comply. And she tells him, do not tell anybody about me. Don't tell anybody what's going on in this house. And in fact, get a personal belonging from every student in your classroom and bring it to me the next day. So something's going on with the grandmother where she's ill. I believe she has cancer or something like that. And she needs people, or she needs like life force energy to keep herself alive, something like that. So long story short, it goes back in class, and he gets the idea of taking like the name tags of every kid in his classroom. He sneaks off during recess, and then he's confronted briefly by Justine to see what's going on because he seemed like he's acting a little off. And she doesn't know exactly that he stole the name tags. She just caught him right after he was done. And she tries to talk to him because she senses that he's a little off. He seems a little more distant than usual, but he tries to play it off like, no, I'm fine, I'm cool, I'm just ready to go back to recess now, yada, 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 yada. So he goes ahead and gives his grandmother the name tags, and then that's when she does her thing late at night. And then it happens, of course, at 2:17 a.m. And this explains how the kids got up that night and we never heard them again. And we see them all coming over to the house, and they all start coming towards the basement. So fast forward back to Justine and Archer. They decide to go back in the house, and they see Paul in his trance state coming outside the house. Justine, of course, recognizes him, and they decide to go in there to investigate, see what's going on. And this is where the grandmother had lines of salt in the sand, and she had Alex's parents at the door standing guard in their trance-like state. And she tells Alex, don't cross that salt line. And then it turns out she also had the same thing downstairs where Paul and James were. So as Archer and Justine are coming into the house, I believe Archer crosses the line too late. Or no, excuse me, Justine crosses the line too late, and then she gets attacked by Paul. And that whole sequence is disturbing. And of course, Archer is fighting James. So the thing I did not expect about this movie was it was a little more funny and comedic more than I expected it to be. Of course, it was a suspenseful, intense movie, of course, and it was pretty scary in moments. But there was a lot of funny moments too, and I was not expecting that from this film. But the way Archer had to keep fighting James off was pretty funny. But Paul was terrifying because when they're in the trance-like state, you can see it in the eyes, and it just, it's just not like, it's more than them not acting like this stuff. You can see it in the face too. It's just there was something very jarring, very unsettling about all that. So Justine is struggling with Paul, She tries to grade, and this is where it gets a little graphic and a little disturbing. And I wouldn't recommend this film to anybody, especially if you're not a horror fan to begin with. So she tries to grade his face with a grater with a pillar at first. That doesn't work, and then finally she ends up killing him by shooting him in the head, and then that's that. And then I believe Archer was still struggling with James because James was relentless and he kept coming after no matter how many times Archer was beating him down. And then Justine had to come up behind and shoot James in the head to help Archer. And then Archer tried to go down the basement and try to find his son. And then this is where we see Alex upstairs, and he makes a mistake of crossing the salt line with his parents. And then he's getting caught. Alex is upstairs getting accosted by his parents. So this was one of the most intense parts of the movies. And back to Archer downstairs in the basement. He's still looking for his son. It's dark down there, mind you. You can't see. And he's looking. He's seeing every other kid but his own son. And this is where we find the grandmother hiding down there. And she does something to Archer. She puts him in a trance-like state, where he's attacking Julia Garner's character, Justine. So he's choking her back upstairs. But then as Alex is trying to hide from his parents, Alex gets the brilliant idea of doing what the grandmother's doing, is like breaking off, putting a piece of her hair, doing the same thing. And he gets the kids to attack the grandmother. And this happened to be one of the most funniest yet most gruesome moments in the film towards the end. The kids are giving chase now to the grandmother, and she's running outside because she realizes what's happening. And as she runs off, she's running from the kids, and she eventually one of the kids eventually catches up with her. And this is one of the most gruesome moments in the film. And I had to like look away because it was that gross. But long story short, for lack of a better term, and this is an understatement, she gets unalived. And so it was hard to look at that. But and then Archer gets taken out of his catatonic state. He lets Justine go. Alex is hugging his parents, but they're still catatonic, but they're no longer coming after him. And this was one of the moments where Archer finally catches up with his son, because he's following the debris, the chaos, which eventually leads into the circle of kids. And all the kids are just standing around the grandmother's remains, and he just grabs his son and just walks off. And what was unsettling about this, it's not a clean, happy ending where everything is right, everybody's back to normal, and life goes on. Some of these kids, and there's a kid narrator in this film, and he explains that even after all this, some of the kids were still catatonic. They weren't talking, but some of them eventually started talking again after a while. So it's like a slow recovery process. They mentioned that Alex had to move in with an aunt, because his parents had to be put in the hospital. So it wasn't like a clean break per se. So that was the best we can hope for. But this movie is definitely stuck with me, definitely resonated. And then also it had me thinking, I'm glad I was very curious about this movie. The premise had me hooked in. And I'm glad I got to scratch that proverbial itch and find out what happened exactly. So long story short, we had a crazy grandmother witch who was trying to look young, and she was the cause of all the missing children. So that's what it boiled down to. What was interesting about this film was it had some biblical undertones. So there was a reason why they selected, in my opinion, the time 2:17. If you want to go to Matthew 2:17, it has something to do with I believe something to do with children, the slaughter of infants in Bethlehem. So there's a reference in that. There was a lot of biblical names like Paul, James, Matthew, things of that sort. So I think there was something going on with that. But this was definitely a memorable film. I definitely put this in my top 10 of 2025 thus far. I don't know which number I'd rank it exactly. I wouldn't say it's in the top 5. It might be in the second half of the top 10 right now. But we'll cover that in a future video, what are my top 10 of 2025 towards the tail end of the year. But yeah, this movie, it did its thing. I can't front. It was packed where I went. And there was a few moments where I was cringing. I was hiding my face because I didn't know what to expect. And there was a few unsettling jump scare moments. And me personally, oddly enough, I'm not that big of a horror fan, but I'm finding this modern day era of horror very compelling. Everything from Barbarian, of course, the Smile franchise, Long Legs from last year. What else? That Sydney Sweeney movie that came out last year. I forget the name of it. I'm drawing a blank right now. But there's a lot of things. Horror is Together. Just saw that last week as well, and I'll touch and make a video about that pretty soon. But that, yeah, man, it was pretty good. So I would definitely recommend this, especially if you're a horror film. If you enjoyed Barbarian, please go see Weapons as well. So let me know in the comments what y'all thought of this movie. Did you agree with my assessment? Do you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was mid? Please let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys later.